Wow, we are live. Alrighty, tonight is probably by far one of my favorite topics because I love conflict. Except when it's directed to me. Yeah, okay, we talked about that already. Anyways, so today is the 24th version of the Curious Leader Path. And this is version or episode. And today we're talking about difficult situations. So welcome everybody who's here, or welcome to those ones who are listening to afterwards, right? So I am Joanne Stone, and with me is Kat and Todd.
Hi there.
We were just before this session, like we always do, we're always chatting up a storm as to what we want to say today, right? So I'm going to open it up with a question of what do you mean by a difficult situation? Like, so how would you define a difficult situation? Like, what's your definitions? Who wants to go?
Want to go for it, Todd?
Yeah, sure, I'll go for it. I think, like, when I think of difficult situations and when I thought of this conversation, what came up for me was conversationally difficult, like conversational difficulties, conflict, interpersonal conflict. And sometimes that's things that happen at home. Sometimes that's things that happen at work. But ultimately, it's for me, it was always that thing that left me feeling unsettled and discombobulated for some reason. There was an adrenaline, and I think what's really interesting about that is that the adrenaline response is often very like an adrenaline response might be in a situation that wasn't conversational, interpersonal. Like before we jumped on the call, I said, so we're talking about conversations, not escaping from a burning building. And
Yeah.
I imagine that although I have never had to escape from a burning building, I imagine that if I did, that a lot of those similar feelings would probably exist.
Well, it's all threat response, right? The only difference is when there's a burning building, and I just touched wood that hopefully none of us ever have to know what it's like to run from a burning building. But I mean, that's the threat response. That's your nervous system trying to protect you. Right. And I think with difficult situations, the reason they're difficult is because we don't know how to navigate them.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's a really difficult situation just basically means we don't know how to connect with the person that we're talking to. We don't know how to get our points across. There could be animosity. There could be bad blood. It could be just that we're different functions, like we just approach the world in a totally different way. It could be a power struggle. It could be personally unmet needs or the sense of unmet needs. But all of those things will trigger threat responses, fight, flight, or freeze. And the burning building is kind of what our bodies are designed. Like, that's why we have the threat responses, is to run away from those dangerous situations. But the difficult situations, we get the threat response because that's our biology, but that's not necessarily probably the most effective way of dealing with things.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I'm laughing just because I'm thinking of, Todd, how you and I would have interacted.
I would have loved watching
in the before
these guys.
times.
In the before times, yeah.
And then when I think about difficult situations, the first thing that came up to me when I started thinking about it is sometimes they are made up.
Yes.
Like, if it's just before, like, if you're walking into this uncomfortable, like, I love what you're saying, Kat. Like, it's just like, I am unsure, how I'm going to work with that person. How am I going to get it? I don't know. How am I going to show? Like, it's like I start making up that it's going to be a worse situation than it potentially could be. Right. And or the opposite, but I make up what it's going to be, and I make up the story. It's going to be difficult. Right. Which sets me up, in a certain way when I get in there, which isn't so much fun. Kat, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was. I mean, when we were talking about what we were talking about before, is that I sort of look at it that there's two levels of conflict when when we've got difficult situations. One is that it's sort of a clash of identities, power, role, purpose, whatever our goals are, so it could be like a professional explicit clash, but there's also an element of unmet needs. where if we don't feel like we're being respected, if we don't feel like we're being loved, if it's a personal situation, if we don't feel like we're getting what we need, then we overreact. And part of, I think, what you're thinking about with this made up stuff is that we don't always have the skills. We don't always know how to deal with things. So if we don't have self-efficacy, the ability to kind of figure out how to navigate a situation, which means developing skills as we need them and using the skills that we've already developed from the past. If we don't have a strong sense of self-efficacy and ability to learn, that's when we kind of make up all these stories of, oh my God, I bet she's going to do this and I bet he's going to do that. And yeah, we start going into the fantasy and the fear, which is again the threat response, rather than into sort of an analytical response, a curiosity response. Yeah.
Oh, you said the magic word.
Logical.
I did.
Logical.
I think I win. Do I win the prize? I think I said it the earliest out of any of our shows.
I think we need to do a bell and go ding, ding, every single time the first person says curiosity. That's the newest part of these episodes. All right, that's great. And it's interesting because I mean you're absolutely right. Like what I recall, like, and it's only been in the last, like, I would say 5 or 6 years that I've been able to be in difficult situations, especially when they're focused to me. When they are focused to me, you know, I would get to the point where I couldn't even almost speak to the people, right? Or I would shut down, I'd be fearful, and I wouldn't even talk to them, right? Because I would make up exactly what was going to happen beforehand, and then why should I even go do it and all that kind of stuff, right?
We should all be Hollywood producers, given how good our fantasies are. I mean, we got these whole movie scripts going in our heads, right? Yeah,
I don't know, and I'm pretty sure not everybody wants to see everybody's movie script, but yeah, I mean, hey, who knows? Yeah, so this is the whole thing with the difficult, and I know that I started off with, you know, Todd, I love conflict. I mean, I'm okay with mediating conflict amongst two people. So if Kat and Todd were doing awesome, this would be so cool and fun for me.
I have watched you mediate conflict, and you are a master at it.
And I love it. I think it's just great. But when it's directed to me, it's like a totally different story. And what Todd, you're saying, and sometimes we also create the difficult situation.
Oh, well, yeah, okay. So before the cameras started rolling, I did share that there are parts of my past, and also I'm making up that there might be a few people listening to this that know this because they've experienced it. But there have been times in my past, in my professional past, when I have been the source of a difficult situation. And often in the past, I tried my level best not to do that anymore. But you know, in the past, when that's happened, it has very much been as a result of the things you were describing, Kat. You know, I would go in really hot with guns blazing in a very distinct effort to overpower and intimidate until the situation wasn't a situation that I needed to deal with anymore.
And I would have responded with equal guns blaring, which is
blazing,
sorry.
And this is what I would have loved to have watched.
Too bad we're so mature now.
I know. Look at us being so enlightened and evolved.
But mom, dad, when they're fighting, it can be really scary though. Like it can be scary. Right? Yeah. That's for sure.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? Is this is a very natural response for a lot of people, particularly I'm making up high performing people. And you know, we're so wound up in whatever it is that's important. And Kate
can't imagine it.
Kate, we need to. I'm gonna put this on the screen because hang on, like I want to own this for a second. I want to own that.
Let's take a picture of that.
exactly. Take a screenshot, people who've worked with me in the past, because this is who I am now. Thank you very much for that, Kate. I really do appreciate it.
Oh
Um,
gosh.
yeah, it's true. I think because you know, when oh, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but yeah, like when you're in a space or a mindset of scarcity, and you're
Oh
really in a
yeah.
place where it feels like I'm protecting something important,
Mm.
I'm
Yes.
protecting something precious, someone else wants it. I fear someone else will take it from me,
Yeah.
and that animal response just kicks in, and it's like, no, before you even know it, you're snarling,
Yeah.
and yeah, and that was, and to be honest, I mean, it's one of the reasons, like, I can't even say that I was ashamed of that response, because I wasn't.
Because you're
That
you,
was
but
what,
you're protective or
yeah,
something. Like
well,
there was
that
something
that
else
was
that was
what
there.
that was what being at
Yeah.
work was just
Hmm.
was, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's my husband in the olden days called it my work voice. Like, he could always tell when Business Todd was on the phone and had something important to say, because I'd never yell and holler, but oh, I would be very, very crisp, and I would
Mm,
say some
mm.
really shocking things.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And for me, it was always right fighting. It was
Hmm.
always
Oh,
like I'm the protector of the things that are right. Yeah.
Hmm.
So it's a slightly different place, but it's kind of the same thing, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And I've worked in places where it wasn't wrong.
Hmm.
I did what I was seeing that was happening wasn't right.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I probably took it too far, and I probably should have learned to back down at times too.
Hmm. Yeah, I've made that mistake too.
Mm.
So let me just gonna put this out there. I'm the middle child. I'm always Switzerland and always bringing people together. I would never start it, but I will, maybe to defend. But I would sit there and say that I have created it unintentionally, though. And we were talking
Well,
about
I
this.
think all of us do. And the reason
Mhm.
that we do is because, these are the benefits of conflict, is the fact, and these are
Hmm.
the benefits of
Yes.
diversity. We
Yep.
want people
Mm,
who think differently. We want people who see the world differently, have different perspectives, right? So
Hmm.
by
mhm,
definition, having
mhm.
diversity means it's going to be difficult, right? So
Yes.
it's not that all difficult situations are bad. It's just
Yes.
often, yeah,
Yes.
it's
Yes.
often that we perceive them as bad because number one, our society keeps valuing harmony, which is such a toxic thing,
Hmm.
that
Mm,
toxic positivity, that toxic harmony. And we don't have the skills of knowing how to fight properly, like how to fight constructively. And
Hmm.
then
mhm.
we also don't have those internal skills of self management and knowing, is this actually pushing buttons because I have some trauma that's unresolved or something
Hmm.
emotionally that's unresolved? And I'm actually reacting to a historical pattern that actually
Hmm.
doesn't have that much of a relevance right at the moment, but I'm being triggered, right?
Hmm.
So there's a whole set of skills we don't have.
Yeah,
Hmm.
so talking about the skills, because this is the last 5 years I've been you know crafting up those skills and trying to improve upon those skills. I'm still, it still happens where I will get, I hate to say, I don't know if the right word is triggered,
Hmm.
but where I will feel this response or this reaction,
Hmm.
to shut down or run away or
Hmm.
not have that conversation, but
Hmm.
it gives me space to kind of come back, like it happened to me just recently,
Hmm.
with my family. But in terms of the skills that are needed, so with the way that I've been looking at it is like, and you guys can correct me in this, but like in order when these situations happen, our little amygdala brain and all that kind of stuff, these feelings will get, it can overtake you sometimes. So we
Hmm.
have
Hmm.
to sort of like bring our systems and calm it down, or at least bring
Hmm.
it to it won't be fully calm, but bring it to a place where we're present, right? So
Hmm.
we're here right now. So I'm curious as to what you guys do, like, and there's two scenarios, right? Like usually the situation's coming up, so maybe you do some prep work before,
Hmm.
and then there's the scenario in the moment. What do you do skillfully, which kind of like allows you to get back to being present and out of that flight, fright, mode. So.
You know I'm going to respond with the Matrix, Todd. So do you want to go first?
Oh, she's got a Matrix.
Well, okay, so I'll tell you what comes up for me, because I'm not the scientist here. I'm the anecdotal one, and I've got two answers to that question, because you asked what do I do, and Joanne, you set me on my path to conflict enlightenment when you introduced me to the Four Agreements many years ago, and the one that was the hardest and the one that has been the most impactful and important for me is don't take anything personally. And easier said than done. So much easier said than done. Because when you and I met, I was in that situation where I took almost everything personally, because that's how I was wired to operate for whatever reason. And I haven't unpacked that. So let's not get into that. You're not my therapist. Well, you are kind of, but not when we're on camera. So, and I think that, sort of in that space of not taking anything personally and really just, for me, the mantra then became, well, that means that the things that people say are mostly about them, even when they're directed at me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an invitation for me to kind of go, what's that all about? Like, what's that thing? What is that? What's that thing that you're doing? What is that? Because, if it's about them, well, that's easy to get curious about.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of, and, I tried a billion different things before I hit that Four Agreements. Like, I really, really did. And I, like, none of them stuck. It just wasn't, I didn't get it. Somatics didn't make any sense to me. Nervous system, schmervous system, whatever, like, well, no. And really, like, when I was the difficult person, I also know that, my body was the meat taxi that moved my brain from place to place. That's all it was. So
never heard of it called a meat taxi before. That's good.
I just made it up. You like it?
Yeah,
you can borrow it.
That's good.
But yeah, so that's kind of the thing for me. And like, as more of that awareness happens, and as more of it sinks in, and as more of it, as I practice more of it, and as I get less in my head about getting it wrong, it becomes easier to really live that truth.
Mm-hmm.
And to know that, when someone, is pissed at me for some reason, and they decide to, turn a situation from an easy one to a difficult one, well, then it's like, okay, so something happened. I wonder what it was. Because it might be the thing that I did, but it might also be something else.
Right.
Let's find out.
The curiosity again, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I should also add too that, another ingredient there, and I know you got a Matrix cat, so just gonna say, but another ingredient there is really owning the impact. Because what, someone has pushed on me, someone is creating a situation that I'm interpreting as difficult, and if it's easy in the moment to say, oh, okay, I have impacted you this way, or I have offended you, I've hurt you, I've whatever, right? I own that. I apologize for that impact. And I will do better. Now, from that space, what can I do? From that space, what am I curious about? Because I think that's also an important agreement, or an important ingredient. Like, maybe it's not about me. Maybe I don't need to take it personally, but that doesn't mean that the things that I do don't impact other people.
Right. Well, I like that.
But that kind of goes back to that whole idea that if we look at difficult situations as always a bad thing, then we're never going to get any benefits from it. But what you're kind of describing, and Joanne, you kind of alluded to it as well, is difficult situations are actually, they can be quite constructive. Not always, but they often can be. Like, they're actually a real opportunity for growth. Yeah, for our own growth, for other people's growth, for our relational growth, for our team growth, whatever it might be. Yeah. So both you guys have kind of touched on a lot of the parts of the matrix that I would use. There's the individual level. What's my role in this? Both in terms of how I'm presenting, but also what's going on internally. There's the understanding what's happening for the other person and recognizing they're coming with their own baggage, they're coming with their own patterns, they're coming with their own issues. And then there's the third part, which is kind of what's all the in-between stuff? What are the dynamics between us? What are the systems around us? Yeah, so it's all the situational stuff. And then what we need to do is look at it in 3 contexts. Last 2 weeks ago, you had the helicopter, Joanne, and I think I've got it now.
Oh. You can give back whenever you're done with it.
Yeah, it's pretty loud for me.
Oh wow.
You two can keep it.
Yeah. So there's also the level, what you guys are talking about, sort of in the moment, being present. I would call that palliative, of really just paying attention to what's happening and stop the flow of blood. Like just stop whatever injuries are happening, stop whatever is damaging, and do what you can to not let things get worse. And ideally sort of to try and repair what you can in the moment. And that's basically, like you said, Todd, apologizing and saying, look, that wasn't my intent. And Joanne, you were talking about that off camera before we started chatting. Then there's the healing. So there's a palliative first, the immediate, the present, in the moment. Then there's the healing, where we have to sort of think about what was triggered in me that was actually not really about the situation. How can I make sure that I'm showing up as a more healed, mature person? So we're all going to have triggers. We're all going to have baggage. Like, it's not like any of us are ever going to be free of baggage. But the more that we can develop our healing capacities, the more we can recognize when we're being triggered, and it's actually something historical that's being triggered, the more that we can, number one, catch it, and the more we can heal it and react less to it. So that's the healing. And then the third piece is the strategic, which is now what are the skill sets that I need to build? How can I understand the circumstances better? How can I rebuild the relationship and build it more strongly? How can we make sure that when any of us are being triggered, that we can take the appropriate response? And it's not like we're all going to be snowflakes. And, every time something happens, like, oh, I'm being triggered. It's not that kind of thing. It's a matter of learning to work within ourselves and recognizing, is this something where I actually do need to stop the conversation? Or is this something where it's an opportunity for healing and I can do something palliative in the moment, and afterwards the healing and sort of repair piece? Yeah. So we always have to think about these difficult situations at least at 3 levels: the individual, the other person, the surrounding stuff, the in the moment, the palliative, the healing, what are the patterns that we're showing up with, and then the strategic, how do we make sure that we actually move forward more strongly, more effectively in the future?
And it's interesting, like for me to kind of like look at in order for me to become present in a lot of conversations from what I've had in the past, but even now, like I can tell you just recently, especially when the people are really close to you, sometimes you just shut down.
Yeah.
And it makes it really difficult. And I've had 2 situations over the last little while, and I think back to your cat, where it just basically, I almost frozen away because I didn't know what to say, but I was aware of the situation. Like I was very much present. I was like breathing in deeply. I kind of like, okay, this isn't necessarily all about you. Just listen, right? Listen to what's going on. And sometimes just one of the strategies that I found is kind of like even just walking away, right? Sometimes you have to walk away and kind of realize, oh, that's what actually happened, and then come back and then go back and have that conversation about.
And just for the record, communicating before you walk away. Don't just walk away. Say, hey, I'm just gonna do a time out here.
Yeah, and sometimes, I think we were talking about, sometimes it's hard. You can't. It's hard to control. Sometimes it's just like you get triggered in that particular moment. Sometimes it's just like it's done something to you. At the best of us. I think I know I've had a lot of coping over the years, meditation, understanding how I work, operating of myself, journaling, going and doing inner childhood work. Like I've been doing huge amounts of work on myself so that, I can remain present and remain in that conversation. So I'm grateful for all those great
Mhm.
things. And I also know it's not necessarily all healed, and neither will it's all dampened. It's still there, but it's not 100% gone. But I
But
think
that's where the
it's a
traffic
learning.
lights, like if it's somebody that you have a relationship with and they do
Yes.
trigger you, and the reality is anytime you love somebody, they're going
Oh,
to trigger you like that.
yeah.
There's a,
But but it's a gem in it. Like, I mean, there's so much,
yeah,
like what Kat, you're saying, and this is
yeah,
what I love about conflict. There's such a gem in it. There's such a
yeah.
gem in it. Because then it was
And
like,
if we can add in,
oh,
like, instead
interesting.
of, just do the
Yeah.
timeout and just, establish that if you're going to get
Yeah.
too heated or too triggered or whatever the word is, just do the
Yeah.
timeout or use the traffic signals, which people use in a range of circumstances,
Yeah.
which is, green is just keep going. Yellow means, hang on a second, I'm starting to feel a
Mhm.
little uncomfortable. And red is like, I'm going to walk away and I'll come back in 10 minutes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We're going to stop right now.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Love
recognize that model. That's a good one. Yeah.
It's used in a range of places. Yes.
Yep.
And you
Yep.
know what's so interesting when we in our teams and stuff like that, we'll set up conflict agreements so that
Yeah.
we know how we want to be able to work through it. And
Yeah.
so there's some tips and tricks as how to do it there.
Yeah.
And how much do I forget about actually introducing it to my own family, right?
Yeah.
Like I love that. I love the traffic signals. And Todd, like I know that you have like specific when you're addressing difficult situation, you have a little kind of like framework or something like that you use.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when yes, I have a couple tips. I don't know that I would call it a framework, but now it makes me want to write it down and turn it into. But there are a couple things that have been very helpful to me, and particularly in entering a conflict situation, particularly when I'm one of the people who's in conflict, I find that one of the things that's really useful is to start off as early as possible and declare an intention. Like, my intention in this space right now is to partner with you so that we can solve this problem. Or my intention right now is to find out what you need in order to partner with you or whatever, right? Like there's always an opportunity to create and discover a partnership. And when in the past I've been not that, when I've been the difficult person, if someone had said, here's my intention, Todd, what's yours? That would have been incredibly disarming. Because at that moment, like, if I was being honest with myself, I would have had to have said, my intention is to be right, or my intention is to prove you wrong so I feel better. And who wants to say that?
Yeah, I know.
I was just looking at a note that I've got on the wall. There was some research done in compassion, like it was a compassion research study, but there's quite a bit of research into this. And they looked at, and I'm not going to get the study right, but it was something they were looking at doctors and the ones who tended to have better outcomes with their patients. It was general practitioners and the ones who did exactly what you were saying. So it's 30-second check-in. I'm here to help you. How can we achieve our goals? And then 10-second checkout. I want to help you. How do we do that? Yeah.
Yep.
And there's a lot of research that shows doing that in the medical environment generates way better patient outcomes.
That's not surprising at all.
So of course it's going to be brilliant that you do that in other
thanks.
places.
I'm also thinking of all the arguments that I had with doctors in the past too.
Yeah.
I don't think they're watching.
Yeah.
That's another situation. Maybe that's another episode, the white coat syndrome, right?
Yeah.
Being able to come down from that.
That's a good one.
So 1 minute left. Like,
we're coming up at the end.
What's a key kind of takeaway you want people to take away when we
embrace it and be curious?
Yeah.
And give yourself the space. I mean, you don't want to always dive in head first. There could be rocks under the surface of the water.
Yeah. Treat yourself gently and with grace.
Yeah.
Because this isn't easy. And you're going to get it wrong. And that's okay.
Hence the word difficult. Yeah,
but try it out and see. Because the thing is that that knot in the pit of your stomach that a lot of us feel when we go into difficult situations. We don't
Yeah.
have to feel that. We
Yeah.
really don't
Yeah.
have to feel it.
If we're
And so
willing
much
to
is possible when we don't.
Yeah. If we're willing to adopt sort of a curiosity mindset and the willingness to learn and the willingness to pay attention, we can solve
Yeah.
a lot of situations. I'm laughing, black humor laughing, because I'm thinking there's a few situations in the world that need this, but that are extremely difficult. But yeah, we're talking more the types of situations that we're going to find ourselves in.
Wow. Oh, isn't that interesting? Because I actually think that this scales really, really well. But that's possibly another conversation for another time too.
I guess my whole thing is around difficult situations is it's just treat it like it's a spider web. It's just like you keep if you have a fear of walking through it, just keep walking through it.
Yeah.
And the more that you keep walking through it, the more skills that you'll get, the more you'll learn, and the more you'll understand how wildly it's amazing for you, for yourself, for the others, and it is such a gem. So.
Yeah, I love that. Courage isn't living without fear. It's living in fear and doing it anyway.
Whoa! On that note, thank you all.
Thank you, Joanne, for facilitating us today. Yeah.
All right.
And thank you everyone for joining us.
Have a nice evening.
See you next time. Yeah.